talk is on the Magga-Vibhanga Sutta, which is the Buddha's analysis of the Eightfold Path. And so first here, he describes exactly what the path is in very clear and direct terms. And then what is most important and interesting to me is how he describes the results of the path. So anybody that's confused about the Buddha's practice, and I'm using that term to describe something quite different than modern Buddhism, knows very clearly what the Buddhist path is and how to experience it. Much like the last week's talk on the Arya-Pariyasana Sutta that describes the Buddha's own search for awakening and what he found to be useful and what he found to be simply more distracting. And again, they're just very clear teachings on how to develop a Dhamma practice and how to know that you're practicing correctly. So the Magga-Vibhanga Sutta. I have heard that at one time the Buddha was staying in Savatthi at Jita's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. There he addressed those assembled. Friends, I will now give you a detailed analysis of the Noble Eightfold Path. Listen mindfully. This is the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation. That is the entire path that the Buddha taught towards awakening. And now he'll describe what all of those different factors mean. And what is right view? Right view is knowledge with regard to stress, or knowledge with regard to dukkha or suffering. Knowledge with regard to the origination of stress, knowledge with regard to the cessation of stress, and knowledge with regard to the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress. That is as clear and detailed description of the Buddha's entire path to awakening, and it points directly to the goal. In other words, the Buddha wasn't concerned about any type of magical or mystical teachings. He wasn't concerned about attempting to establish the self in non-physical realms. He wasn't interested in appealing to or appeasing deities that would grant awakening. It is a direct experience of knowledge with regards to the nature of suffering. To many, that will feel like or seem like it's almost too simplistic and would fail to see the value in that until you understand that it is the constant preoccupation with stress, with that which we want to continue because it's giving us pleasure, or that which we want to avoid because we find it taking away from our pleasure. That is a constant preoccupation and the distraction of that preoccupation with stress. In other words, the common word for that would be I-making or conceit, meaning we see everything in a self-referential view. And when we have a penetrative and profound understanding of the nature of suffering, we lose that self-centered, self-referential view and remain at peace with no matter what's occurring. That second aspect of right view, knowledge with regard to the origination of stress, means that we understand how we create suffering in our own minds through craving for and clinging to wrong views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Knowledge with regard to the cessation of stress means that we have had a direct experience of this developing understanding, and we have experienced that cessation of our own contributions to stress. Last Tuesday, this past Tuesday, was a talk on the Salata Sutta, and there'll be another talk this Saturday, where the Buddha describes using the visual of two arrows, meaning that we get struck with the first arrow of disappointment as a consequence of living in the world, and then we inflict the second arrow by desire, by wanting things to be different than they are. And again, the Buddha described suffering or dukkha very clearly as sickness, aging, and death are suffering. Birth is suffering. Not getting what is desired is suffering. Getting what is undesired is suffering. Getting what we don't want. And then he would always conclude that by saying, in short, the five clinging aggregates are suffering. And so the five clinging aggregates describe the ongoing personal experience of suffering. And it's rooted in craving for and clinging to wrong views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. And so then he concludes this description of profound right view as knowledge with regard to the way of practice leading to the cessation of stress. And that points directly to the Eightfold Path. And this is, again, such clear instruction on what the Buddha taught at his path to awakening. He concludes that simple statement as saying, this, friends, is right view. So if there's any, if you have any misunderstanding of what right view is, all you have to do is refer back to the Buddha's words. There's no skillful reason to listen to somebody else's interpretation, including mine, because the Buddha's words are still present here. There's no reason to look anywhere else. The Buddha continues, and what is right intention? Right intention is being mindful of the intention to recognize and abandon wrong views. And how do we do that? How do we understand that we're looking for or maintaining the intention to recognize and abandon wrong views? Because we're using the Eightfold Path to frame our Dhamma practice. The Buddha continues, being mindful of the intention to remain free from ill will. And that is not ill will only towards others. It's ill will towards ourselves. And that ill will towards ourselves is such a subtle factor in this that most of us miss it. And we miss it because we get caught up in the idea of always being helpful towards others, but not being helpful towards ourselves, and not developing a Dhamma practice that is focused on developing self-understanding, and not the common expression of this, the modern word is engaged Buddhism, always trying to accomplish something in the outer world rather than ending conflict in our inner world. That's what the Buddha is talking about, most importantly, in being mindful of the intention to remain free from ill will towards ourselves first, and then to others. Right intention is being mindful of the intention to remain harmless to all beings. So first we resolve the conflict in ourselves, and then as a natural consequence of that, we can hold the intention to remain harmless to all beings. And now it's also important to remember, within the framework of the Dhamma, the Buddha always taught that the most loving thing we can do is to develop an authentic Dhamma and then present that to others. Excuse me. I'll ask for any questions or comments as we go along. I'm just checking if anybody entered any chat in there. This, friends, is right intention. And what is right speech? Abstaining from lying, abstaining from divisive speech, abstaining from abusive speech, abstaining from gossip, and abstaining from idle chatter. Very, very simple teachings. There's two things that need to be pointed out here. One is abstaining from divisive speech. Now remember, the Buddha is teaching this within the original Sangha. And what he's referring to here is to, and this is actually in the Vinaya Pitaka, that when we're gathered as a Sangha to speak and only of the Dhamma, meaning speak only what the Buddha teaches. Divisive speech would be trying to introduce something that is outside of the Buddha's Dhamma, or an adaptation, accommodation, or an embellishment to the Dhamma. This was common during the Buddha's time, and it's just as common today. And referring back to that Aryapariyasana Sutta, the Buddha found that out through his own search for awakening. And then abstaining from abusive speech is the same thing, that within our Sangha, most importantly, that we are supportive of each other in developing the Buddha's Dhamma. Some of you will remember the recent talks on jhana, and specifically, I think it was the last one on the Anupada Sutta, where the Buddha uses Sariputta as an example, that an example of jhana, of ever deepening levels of meditative absorption, is that the self-talk begins to quiet down. And that is a clear way of knowing if we're deepening concentration, if in our meditation practice, that self-talk, always continuing this story that we're using to describe ourselves in relation to the world and the events that are occurring in our lives from that point of view of wrong view, or if our minds are deepening concentration and our minds are beginning to quiet. That is the most profound example of noble silence. Most of the application that we think of as noble silence is applied outwardly, meaning that, and rightly so, that if we have nothing useful to say within the framework of right speech, that we remain quiet. But the most profound level of noble silence is to be able to maintain noble silence within our own minds. And that's on our cushion and off our cushion. The Buddha continues or concludes that with saying, this, friends, is right speech. Again, very simple and direct teachings, nothing ambiguous about any of this. And it's such clear direction as to what true Dhamma practice, authentic Dhamma practice is. The Buddha continues, and what is right action? Right action is abstaining from taking life, abstaining from taking what is not freely given, abstaining from sexual misconduct. This, friends, is right action. Again, following in line from right speech, very simple and clear direction. The one, maybe two questions of maybe ambiguity here is the not taking life. And I just got an email from one of my online students who's a hunter, but he hunts for his own food, and he does it in a very respectful way towards the animals. And this is such a big misunderstanding, that the Buddha was a vegetarian and he preached that we should all be vegetarians, and nothing is further from the truth. In fact, there's many suttas where the Buddha admonished some of the monks or nuns that came back from their alms mounds and alms rounds and were full of pride that they were offered meat, and they returned it down. And the Buddha consistently scolded them because the idea of alms rounds was a mutual give and take, where the townsfolk would give some of their often meager supplies, meager food, to support the Sangha so that they could receive the Dhamma teachings. And so you took what you were given. And the Buddha never taught that that we should not eat animals, or that the taking of animal flesh was somehow outside of this directive. What is most important, again, at the very subtle levels of not taking life, is obvious that we don't murder each other. But as we develop the Dhamma to much more subtle levels, are we engaging in character suicide by the words that we use, following in right speech and what those directives there? And often those of us, and I'm talking in general terms, that are involved in this kind of new age spiritual mentality, and then very specifically in modern Buddhism, we engage in rhetoric that is really character assassination, because we feel somehow justified that we're now Buddhists with quotation marks, and that gives us the right to talk about other people who aren't acting in the way that we think they should act, including this idea of environmental or animal activism. It's just not something that the Buddha taught. Reflecting it back to the progression here in the analysis of the Eightfold Path, what's most important is not ending the conflict out in the world, but ending the conflict in our own mind. Develop a calm and peaceful mind, the Buddha's description of an awakened mind. The Buddha continues, and what is right livelihood? Right livelihood abandons dishonest livelihood, and right livelihood is honest livelihood. When I first came across this fifth factor of the Eightfold Path, I wondered why the Buddha needed to include this idea of right livelihood. Wasn't this notion covered in right speech and right action? Until I realized, and it's what the Buddha realized also, that people that were otherwise engaged in the moral and ethical aspects of right speech and right action would take liberties with that when it was time to put food on the table for the family. And even here, and it's probably in some cases much more difficult to practice these tenets of right speech and right action as it applies to right livelihood. Excuse me. In so many ways, we justify taking these liberties because of these things that we are, on a very subtle level, grasping after or clinging to, specifically eye-making. And so those of you that listen to the Arya Pariyasana Sutta, you remember that Alara Kalama and Udaka Ramaputta almost begged the Buddha to come and join them and be a part of their Sangha, and they could be one of their premier teachers. And the Buddha declined that because he understood that teaching something that he knew to be inauthentic and only leading to more confusion and furthering ignorance in other people's minds is an act of wrong livelihood. And that goes right in line with right speech and right action. The Buddha concludes that with this, friends, is right livelihood. You know, I hear people typing, but I don't see anything coming up on the chat window. So I wonder if you are, and that aspect is not working. But I'll get to that in a minute. And what is right effort? Right effort is effort developing the skillful desire and ongoing persistence to avoid unskillful qualities that are not present. It's a lot of words, but it simply means to be mindful of what's occurring in our own minds. And are we regenerating thoughts that are prone to conflict? Right effort is effort developing the skillful desire and ongoing persistence to abandon unskillful qualities that are present. And how do we know what are skillful and unskillful qualities? That's part of the Eightfold Path. And it's very clearly described in what the Buddha is presenting here. Oh, yes, people should mute their microphone. Please mute your microphone if you haven't. Right effort is effort developing the skillful desire and ongoing persistence to establish skillful qualities that are not yet present. What are those skillful qualities? Well, they're also reflected in this analysis of the Eightfold Path. But as we understand the overriding context of the Buddha's Dhamma, unskillful qualities are qualities that are rooted in fabrications that arise from ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Skillful qualities are those qualities that are developed within the framework of the Eightfold Path. Again, how do we know it? We have to integrate the Eightfold Path. The Buddha continues. Right effort is effort developing the skillful desire and ongoing persistence to end confusion and increase the full development of skillful qualities that are present. It means that we are mindful enough to recognize that our meditation practice is bearing fruit, meaning that it's deepening concentration, and we're able to apply that ever deepening concentration to increase our mindfulness of these factors of the Eightfold Path. And that's what the Buddha will describe right here. And what is right mindfulness? Right mindfulness is remaining mindful of the body, free of distraction, ardent, alert, and mindful of abandoning greed and reaction to worldly events. That relates directly to the first part of the Satipatthana Sutta, that part of the Satipatthana Sutta that is instruction for meditation practice. The point of the Buddha's meditation method of deepening jhana, another word for that is a mind united in its body. A mind that is well concentrated is a mind that is present with what's occurring. That can be said as the sole purpose of the Buddha's Dhamma, to be mindfully present with what's occurring without the need for it to be any different than what is occurring. Right mindfulness is remaining mindful of feelings arising and passing away, free of distraction, ardent, alert, and mindful of abandoning greed in reaction to worldly events. That second foundation of mindfulness, being mindful of feelings arising and passing away, is what the Buddha is referring to here. Without the need of reacting to our feelings that would give rise to wanting something to be different than it is, meaning more of something or less of something. Excuse me. Right mindfulness is remaining mindful of mental qualities arising and passing away, free of distraction, ardent, alert, and mindful of abandoning greed in reaction to worldly events. The same thing, that third foundation of mindfulness, to be mindful of thoughts arising and passing away, without the need for them to be any different than it is. That's referring to abandoning greed in reaction to worldly events is what's occurring within our minds, that something comes up that through sensuality, through to be more or less than, we react to it out of greed, out of that greed that is born of ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Right mindfulness is remaining mindful of the quality of mind arising and passing away, free of distraction, ardent, alert, and mindful of abandoning greed and reaction to worldly events. That directly relates to the fourth foundation of mindfulness, that to notice the present quality of your mind that is a result of reacting to or not to feelings and thoughts arising and passing away. And if we're simply remaining mindful of our breath, as feelings arise and pass away and thoughts arise and pass away, free of distraction and free of the need to analyze feelings or thoughts, which is a lot of modern Buddhism is taught that we should spend our meditation time analyzing our feelings and thoughts, and nothing is further from the truth. as the Buddha teaches in the Satipatthana Sutta. And right here, simply being mindful of the arising and passing away of feelings and thoughts, and maintaining that level of jhana, that concentration on our breath, then the quality of our mind remains peaceful and calm. But if we notice that we're being caught up in our thoughts and our feelings, we will then notice through a measure of concentration that our minds are agitated at some level. And that's simply a reminder that we need to deepen our concentration. It's in no way a teaching that we should judge ourselves or our Dhamma practice harshly. Remain ardent, alert, and mindful of abandoning greed and reaction to worldly events means that whatever quality of mind we find ourselves in, to be at peace with it. And I often say that we learn to be at peace with less than. That's the essence of that fourth foundation of mindfulness. The Buddha concludes that by saying, this, friends, is right mindfulness. And then he asks, what is right meditation? For one who has developed right meditation, their concentration increases. Speaking directly to the Buddha's reference to jhana, how when he would tell someone it's time to go meditate, he would say, go find the root of a tree or an empty hut, meaning go find a place of seclusion and do jhana. That was the extent of the Buddha's instruction for meditation outside of the Satipatthana Sutta. And then you know through the other suttas that I teach that he taught a singular meditation method that we call today shamatha vipassana meditation, meaning a method to quiet the mind, to deepen concentration, so that we can gain a very specific insight into three marks of existence. It's going to go back to the beginning. For one who has developed, the beginning of this section, not the beginning of the sutta. For one who has developed right meditation, their concentration increases and they withdraw from the need for sensual stimulation. That's that whole aspect of seclusion. In the first foundation of mindfulness, the Buddha first teaches that we find a secluded spot and begin to be mindful of the breath in the body. That begins that establishment of seclusion. And that is the first jhana, as we talked about in those previous suttas. For one who has developed right meditation, their concentration increases and they withdraw unskillful mental qualities. For one who has developed right meditation, their concentration increases and they enter and remain in the first jhana, the first level of meditative absorption, which is joyful engagement and pleasure in the Dhamma, born from withdrawal and accompanied by directed thought and mindful evaluation. So that simply means that we are in that first level of jhana, we are still mindful of the continued intention of engaging in the practice. And there's still a level of evaluation, meaning that we are putting a value judgment on our meditation practice. And it might be, are we doing this right? Or are we missing something? But that's simply the first level. And to recognize that, we continue our meditation practice. And as the Buddha continues, for one who has developed right meditation, their concentration increases and their directed thoughts and mindful evaluation quiets. It's simply an ever deepening level of meditative absorption. They enter and remain in the second jhana, the second level of meditative absorption, which is joyful engagement and pleasure born of deepening concentration, free from directed thought and mindful evaluation, and confident within. Again, this is instructions on how to know that your meditation method is correct and it's bearing fruit. That directed thought and evaluation has fallen away, it's quiet. And we're now noticing the simple joy of this concentration practice. Buddha continues, for one who has developed right meditation, their concentration increases and their joyful engagement fades. So we're not losing something, it's simply an ever deepening level of meditative absorption. Equanimity arises within mindfulness of pleasure in a mind united with the body. That is the recognition of an ever deepening level of meditative absorption. Our minds are now becoming united with our bodies and equanimity prevails. This is the third jhana. In the teachings, I think we did 7 different talks on jhana, and every one of them referenced the importance to recognize and quickly abandon self-establishment in non-physical realms, such as the realm of nothingness or emptiness or infinite consciousness or the infinitude of space or the dimension of perception or neither perception or non-perception. But also the non-physical realms that the Buddha teaches to avoid, and it's more clearly recognized here, is any establishment of ourselves in a conceptual realm, including some type of conceptual Buddhist practice where I'm using a contemplation practice which establishes ourselves outside of our body in that contemplation of something. And it's often would be contemplating compassion or contemplating suffering or contemplating impermanence is not a direct experience of impermanence. It's establishment in a non-physical realm. And other ways that we do that is through ideology. And it might be that a particular engagement with our associations. We might belong to a bowling league, and we think that we are the most ethical bowler. I know I'm using a silly explanation, but that type of thinking is an establishment in a non-physical realm, and it's simply a distraction, and it's to be recognized and abandoned. That is something that falls away in the third jhana and deepens. I'll continue with this. They enter and remain in the third jhana. The wise know this as equanimous and mindful. It's a pleasant abiding. And every one of us that has engaged in shamatha vipassana meditation within the framework of the Eightfold Path has had that experience of a pleasant abiding. And it's to be recognized. Again, the jhanas aren't levels of meditative absorption to grasp after or to try to achieve. They're simply taught to be recognized, to reaffirm that we are engaging in right meditation, as the Buddha is teaching here. For one who has developed right meditation, their concentration increases, their mind rests in equanimity. Excuse me. Neither pleasure nor pain have a footing. Neither pleasure nor pain have a footing. In other words, there's no more evaluation at all in this level of jhana. They enter and remain in the fourth jhana. Their mindfulness and equanimity is now pure, free of wrong views relating directly to dependent origination of Four Noble Truths as the Buddha's path to awakening. Their mindfulness and equanimity is pure, free of wrong views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. This, monks, is right meditation. So if we want to understand what the Buddha taught, what an awakened human being taught as right meditation, all we have to refer to is the Buddha's own words to know that this is right meditation. Meditation is taught to deepen, to develop ever deepening levels of jhana or meditative absorption. In the Anapada Sutta, the last one I gave on the series of jhana, the Buddha, using Sariputta as an example of right meditation, talks about how Sariputta developed this fourth jhana, and yet he knew that there were still ever deepening levels of meditative absorption to continue. So the fourth jhana is not, the reason why I'm saying that, the fourth jhana is not to be seen even at that level as something to achieve, just something to recognize that our meditation using is bearing fruit, and it's developing concentration just as it is. A few years ago, I got a question from an online student that kind of knocked me back on my heels a little bit because I was never asked it before. And the question was, why did the Buddha keep meditating after he awakened? And I had to think a few minutes about that. But of course, the reason is, why wouldn't an awakened human being continue to develop ever deepening levels of concentration and enter and remain in that present abiding of shamatha vipassana meditation? This is what the Buddha declared. Those gathered were gratified and delighted at his words. I'm going to end it there. I have some commentary that I'll just make it now. The Magga-Vibhanga Sutta, the description, their analysis of the Buddha's Eightfold Path, is one of the most clear and direct teachings the Buddha ever gave on his Dhamma practice. And he never taught anything else. He never taught, as we learned through the series on jhana, or last week's talk on the Arya-Pariyasana Sutta. After all of those years of searching with all the spiritual teachers and all the different practices that were common during his time in northern India, and just as common today, he rejected every one of them until he came to the realization as described in the Nagara Sutta of, and after recognizing that feedback loop of being caught in self-referential views rooted in ignorance, now understood as ignorance of Four Noble Truths, was he able to recognize that feedback loop, leave it behind, and that is when he realized this Eightfold Path. And as he says in the Nagara Sutta and many others, he discovered this timeless path. And what that means is not that there's, and again, there's a misunderstanding that the Buddha's path is something that extends endlessly back into the past and will be here endlessly in the future. It doesn't mean that. The Buddha talked about discovering a path never heard before, but it is a timeless path, meaning that it is always an appropriate and useful and effective path. So, there's Lorna on the screen. Hey, Lorna. Let me finish the talk and then I'll see if I can figure out how to use all the rest of this. So I think that's enough tonight for this talk. Excuse I'm just getting used to this platform, so hopefully this will work out even better. Lost you, Lorna. I'm not sure. Does anybody have any questions? And can you let me see how to do this. Why don't you, Lorna? Do you have access to your mic, or do you want to type in a question? And there's a few other folks that are online. Again, I'm just getting used to this. Sherry, I see that you're online and you've muted your microphone. Do you want to unmute it and say something? I wonder if I have to do that.
Hi, John. I unmuted my mic, so Lorna can hear me. Put your thumb up if you can hear me, Lorna. Lorna can't hear me. Can you hear me, Lorna? Put your thumb up if you can hear me.
Well, I can hear you. I can, if you have a question, I can relay it.
No, she can hear.
Oh,
John,
good. Okay.
yeah, see, John, can you hear me? Put your thumb up if you can hear me, John.
I can hear you.
Okay. Lorna, can you hear me?
Well, okay. Good.
Working. Okay.
Well, I can hear you.
I mean, I use this platform a lot for similar things, and it works. It usually works pretty good.
Well, like I said, it's the first time I used it. I'm not sure why it's not working wonderfully well, but
not too bad.
no, figure it out. All right. I wonder if I have to do this. No, that's not. Again, there's a few other folks that are online. If you have any questions, you can either type them in the chat box, or you can unmute your mic and ask the question. No, well, I'm going to continue with this this platform. I'm going to use it Saturday, and I'll be using it on our Tuesday classes. Yeah, I see. Hi, Sherry. Yeah, first time in the room. On my screen, it does say that your microphone is muted. If you can see a way to unmute it. But Sherry's saying hi to everyone. Does anybody have any questions or comments about tonight's talk? You could type it in if you want.
Always good to hear. When you had said, John, that that is a good question. Like, why did the Buddha keep meditating, etc. But I think once one has seen into the unsatisfactory nature of of dukkha, right, or of transient phenomena, and the preoccupation with such, it just makes sense to, that's kind of like, what else would one do but sit and abide peacefully? And when someone had a question or a teaching was needed or a dispute was needing mediation, the Buddha would step in and speak up. But otherwise, yeah, take care of your basic needs and you sit in tranquility. Or walk in tranquility.
Yeah.
Sleep. Abide.
It's a very, very simple and direct path. The only difficulty that some people have is actually engaging in the path and not introducing what they'd like it to be. And that's a common problem. But well, again, here's.
I thought she found the microphone button, but she's in a loud place.
Oh, okay. Well,
Okay.
Sherry, I'm glad you could join us. And there's someone else, 484. I wonder if that might be Jane. I think that's a Bethlehem exchange. So if that's you, Jane, I'm glad you could join us. And, I promise some of these kinks worked out with this platform. But I'll be using it. There's Bodie. Say hello. There's Lorna again.
Hi, Bo.
Hey, John, I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Mary.
Oh, okay. Hi, it's Mary. And I wasn't able to get the visual just because I hadn't downloaded the app yet. So I called in on the conference line instead. So I've heard it. I just didn't get to watch it because I haven't downloaded the app yet, and that was going to take too long.
Okay, well, great. So now I didn't know about that, so I'll make sure people know to get the app.
Right.
And
Yeah. So like if somebody were driving, they could. Well, not that we're supposed to be distracted, but if somebody was somewhere where they could only call in, this is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it is. And
I didn't know you could hear me.
Yeah, I can. And you heard the talk loud and clear?
I did. Perfectly clear.
Good. You found it beneficial?
Yes, of course. Hearing your voice and hearing the sutta is, of course, very beneficial.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad you called in, and again, I see Lorna's still there. You don't have a microphone, Lorna?
Well, I might do.
Oh, there you are.
There she is. Lorna.
I've had a very frustrating time trying to get through. I can either hear you, or I can see you and not hear you, and it's been a bit frustrating. But I've actually sent you an email saying that perhaps we should go through the settings on Saturday, so I can make a better connection with you on these Thursday evenings.
Yeah, I wonder if that has to do with your own internet connection, but I'm just speculating with that. Maura, were you able to hear me throughout the talk?
Yeah, and as I said, so I've used Zoom for, even we'll use it for four-way conversations or something if something needs to be worked out. And actually the quality right now, John, is excellent. I can hear you really well. There's not an echo chamber, so you're using a really good microphone, which is really helpful. I'm just using my iPhone right now. And if you are, Mary, or anyone, like if you are in a place and you want to listen in, but there's like visual distractions, you can use the app and just move, and you can mute the video so people can't see you. I've done it in a parking lot walking out, but and you can mute. You should always mute your microphone during like the main talk or something. And then it's all down the bottom. You just have to like touch the bottom of the screen, and it'll show stop video, mute microphone. And I know John wants to talk about the sutta, so I'll be quiet now.
No, I'm done. Thank you for all that feedback. And Sherry, I'm glad you could join us. And I understand you're in a coffee shop. And Mary, I'm glad you joined in. So this seems like a much more useful platform, so that people can do just what we did tonight to interact. So I'll be using it going forward. I'll understand how to use it even better. And then I will be posting these on YouTube, but obviously I won't be streaming live to YouTube, at least as long as I'm using this Zoom platform.
Sorry, John. This is really helpful because there's a couple people. We're probably coming on Saturday. I'll be there on Saturday, but my friend Sandy might be coming. She used to come to the class, but she lives out here by me. So it'll be great for her because I know she'll like listen in if she would like to, but we're too far. I mean, it's like, I know Mary travels a long way, but it's kind of
Yeah,
far.
the ones that really want the Dhamma, they make it to the Sangha.
I know, it's kind of far.
Well, good. I look forward to seeing you on Saturday. And just a reminder, next Tuesday is our Dana dinner. And so we'll have our Tuesday class will be our Monday class next week, but we will have a class on next Monday. And I'm just putting on well, I'll mention this on Saturday about the teacher training. So, boy, thank you all for joining tonight. I would say that this first time on this platform was a rousing success.
Deeso really appreciated hearing the Dhamma.
Yeah.
It did.
I appreciate it. Well, I'll see some of you on Saturday, and all of you online, and all of you. You can always feel free to send me an email or anything if you have a question. Just please feel free to do so.
Hi, folks.
There's the awakened dog. Peace, everyone.
Good night. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Thank you, Lorna. See you, Mary. See you, Sherry. See you, Maura.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.